Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to talk about a pending legislative matter that we will be discussing later in the day, the American Security Against Foreign Enemies Act of 2015. This is the title of the bill that was passed by the House in November that is now pending before the Senate and we'll be discussing later. I want to talk for a few minutes, but the punchline is as indicated on this board. We're talking about who are America's foreign enemies. This is a bill that deals with Iraqi and Syrian refugees, and I assert that refugees are not our enemy, ISIL is our enemy. And yet, for some strange reason, in the 18th month of a war against ISIL, Congress has been unwilling to debate our real enemy. First, refugees are not our enemies. The refugee crisis with refugees coming from Syria and now Iraq has been called the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. 4 million Syrians have left their native country because of being exposed to the atrocities of being barrel bombed by Bashar al-Assad and now the atrocities of ISIL and other terrorist organizations. Those 4 million have left to find haven, just as any family would, from this horrible violence. Over 200,000 Syrians have been killed by this violence. Probably the number is now approaching 300,000. In addition to the 4 million Syrian refugees who've left Syria to escape violence, there are an additional 8 million Syrians who have left their homes and been displaced within the country who could leave the country at any moment as the violence continues. This is who these refugees are: victims of violence, victims of unspeakable atrocity, perpetrated first by the horrible dictator Bashar al-Assad and second by terrorist groups like ISIL. And yet this bill would say these refugees are enemies. They're enemies. Wrote a poem about the Statue of Liberty for a fundraising contest to help raise money, and that's why the statue is there now. And the poem is called The New Colossus. The Colossus references to one of the wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. And Emma Lazarus wrote this poem about the Statue of Liberty, calling it the New Colossus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome, her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. The debate that we'll undertake about this bill, about whether we call refugees enemies, is a debate about who we are as a nation. Let's honor our history. Let's honor our values, and let's do what Americans have always done, been willing to extend a hand to those who are victimized by atrocity in other lands, rather than extend the back of our hand and label them as enemies. ISIL has claimed credit for bringing down an airliner, killing tourists in the Sinai. ISIL has claimed credit for bombing and shooting attacks, killing hundreds in Paris. ISIL has claimed credit for a bombing at a peace rally in Ankara, Turkey, that killed hundreds, and then a bombing outside the Blue Mosque in Istanbul 2 weeks ago that killed 15 and injured dozens more. The shooters in San Bernardino were inspired by ISIL, even if they weren't directly connected to them. And within the last few days, we saw another attack and explosion in Jakarta that was claimed by ISIL. Now, folks, that's who an enemy is. Not a refugee who is fleeing ISIL. ISIL is the enemy. ISIL is the enemy. ISIL must be defeated. And yet we're not debating ISIL. And we haven't been willing to debate ISIL in 18 months. Instead, we're trying to claim that refugees are the enemies of this Statue of Liberty nation. Why has Congress been silent about ISIL for 18 months? Our president has asked Congress, do your job and declare war against ISIL. He even sent to us a proposed authorization 11 months ago. 11 months ago, the president sent to Congress a proposed authorization against ISIL. There has not been a vote on the floor in the House. There has not been a vote on the floor in the Senate. There has not been a debate on the floor of the House or Senate. There's not been a debate or vote in committees in the House or Senate. For 11 months since the president asked us, let's get involved and take action against ISIL, there has been no action. So my question is actually critical, but it's also self-critical. Why has Congress been silent in the 18-month battle against ISIL? It's because of fear. Fear of not ISIL, fear of accountability. A war vote is hard. It's the hardest vote we will ever cast, and it should be. And it should be. How much easier is it to criticize the president and say, we don't like your strategy? You're doing it wrong. How come you don't do more airstrikes here or put more boots on the ground there? That is much easier for Congress to do than to actually have a debate about ISIL and craft a strategy and then say, we, members of Congress, individually are putting our names on this. Members of Congress have been looking actively to avoid a vote on this for 18 months because a war vote is tough. Under the best of circumstances, there's going to be consequences that will be painful and tragic. There will be American lives lost. And that's under the best of circumstances. War isn't always fought under the best of circumstances. There will be surprises. There will be twists and turns. We'll go down a path like trying to train and equip a moderate Syrian opposition and find that we've invested in that and it doesn't work out the way we hope. And so people, I think, in Congress, both houses, both parties, have had a sense that, well, maybe if we don't vote and we just kind of criticize the president and we just kind of turn our eye while we're essentially forcing people to risk their lives in a war that we're not willing to declare, people won't hold us accountable. I've seen that tendency throughout my 21 years in elected service when a tough vote is on the table, when something is hard and complicated, and this certainly is. If I can avoid it, well, I'd like to avoid it. But that is so disrespectful to the oath that we took, where we pledged to live up to the laws, including the Article I responsibilities of Congress. It is so disrespectful to the volunteer military who is deployed overseas, risking their lives, and the families of those who've already lost their lives. And after all, what is our fear of a tough vote in the grand scheme of things as against the sacrifice that our troops are making overseas? Now, that's something that's really hard. Having to cast a tough vote, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. We can do this. We can do this.